On this episode of the DTVC podcast, Todd Liebenow is back, and we are looking at Strike Commando, the Reb Brown classic. So stay tuned for that. Also, we opened the podcast episode talking about Supergirl, the new Supergirl movie, just because he had been on before, and we talked about the original Supergirl there. So we talked about our thoughts about this new one as well. So we opened probably with like 20 or 30 minutes on that. It is spoiler free, so if you haven't seen Supergirl yet, you can hope maybe we sell you on it. Who knows? But it is spoiler free, that opening conversation. And also, Todd has a new podcast out. So he's got Forgotten Filmcast, right? That's the one that he's been doing for years. Great podcast. I always really enjoyed it. I've been a guest on a couple times. But he has a new one called Cartoon Breakdown. So I'm going to mention that in the podcast description as well. You can find that one on iTunes. That's where I found it. I just looked up Cartoon Breakdown. Todd Liebenow, his name is associated with it, so you can go there, follow it. But yeah, he's breaking down, him and his co-host, they're breaking down old cartoons from kind of the golden era of those times. So yeah, definitely check that one out as well. Now, next week, we could be doing either John Cross from After Movie Diner. We're looking at the two Last Seduction movies. So the original Last Seduction with Linda Fiorentino, and then the sequel with Joan Severance. So we do talk about that. So it could be that one. Or Sean Malloy is back too. We recorded an episode on Six Bullets, the Jean-Claude Van Damme. So it's the second of three Ernie Barbarash Jean-Claude Van Damme movies that we're looking at. So we'll do Pound of Flesh later. But so the question is whether it's the John, because I recorded the one with John first and the one with Sean second. It could be John if I can get it edited. So obviously when John and I would do the podcast, it goes longer. And so this one's definitely a meatier one, and it's a matter of how I'm going to edit that one out. And then also when Sean comes on, right, if you know, those episodes are shorter, right? They're usually in the hour and a half range, hour and a half to 2 hour range. So there'd be less editing involved with that one. So that's a question. If I get time to do the bigger edit, it'll be John's. Otherwise, we'll do Sean. So it'll be like D.L. Hughley in Kings of Comedy, right? When he's talking about the bill collectors, and the bill collector's like, when can we expect payment? He's like, you can expect payment any damn time. You pick a time, and we'll be surprised together. Next week, we'll all be surprised together on which episode ends up being the one next week. So stay tuned for that. DTVC Extra, we do have a new episode. Speaking of Supergirl, I did an episode on Supergirl, so you can find that one here in the feed. I also talked about my new novel, Mark and Sales, and did a little bit on the World Cup, kind of the controversy with the U.S. team. So that episode is available now, so you can check that out if you haven't checked it out already. And then, in terms of like future DTVC Extra episodes, I'm looking at a few different topics. So I've talked about Mandalorian or Mortal Kombat. I think Mortal Kombat is going to be coming out soon on HBO Max, maybe in the coming weeks. So that might be one to do. Another idea that I had was I watched Generation X recently. It's on YouTube, but it was the kind of a pilot for an unaired episode or unaired TV show on Fox. It was going to be about the comic book of the same name, Generation X. And so it was on YouTube. I found it and I watched it. And I realized I've done that one, and I've watched Doctor Strange from the late 70s. And then the first two Incredible Hulk TV movies, so Return of the Incredible Hulk and Trial of the Incredible Hulk, those were backdoor pilots for a Thor TV series and a Daredevil TV series that didn't happen. And also the Nick Fury TV movie is available on YouTube. So I was like, I could do an episode on those kind of 5 failed pilots of Marvel projects, because I think that would be an interesting thing to discuss. So that's another idea that I've got for DTVC Extra. So keep an eye out for that. But maybe in the coming weeks, we'll get more DTVC Extra soon. So keep an eye out for that. In terms of the site, this past week we did Trouble Man. We officially got Michael Jai White into the 30 Club, even though it was his 31st film, because he was also in Exit Protocol. But Trouble Man is definitely a better Michael Jai White movie, right? Because he directs it, he's in it more, he's a star. It is available on Stars, so if you have Stars, you can check it out. But I would say, wait for it on a streamer. I think it's more worthy of a streamer. But Method Man was also really great in that. So, but that was our recent review. This weekend, I think we're going to do Champagne and Bullets. Let's just get that one done. Let's get that one reviewed. So keep an eye out for that one this weekend. I think that is everything. I was trying to think if I've been on other podcasts. I did record with the PM podcast, but that one's going to be coming a little bit down the line. So the next PM episode, as you're listening to this, is going to be Magic Kid. And I wasn't on that one. So Hologram Man that we also recorded with Chris the Brain from Bulletproof. That one should be coming in the near future, so keep an eye out for that one as well. But yeah, obviously my newest book, Mark and Sales, available on Kindle, Kindle Unlimited, and in paperback. Also, the back catalog has been selling quite a bit lately, so you're welcome to pick up something from the back catalog as well. Chad Accounting, the first book, the one that is also in the same world as Mark and Sales. Girl in a Gun, Holtman Arms, Don's House in the Mountains. That's my author's cycle trilogy. So any of those, of course, are available as well. Even though they work as a kind of an unofficial trilogy or cycle of books, they can be read in any order. So you don't have to get them. They do Girl in a Gun first. Holtman Arms second, Don's House in the Mountain. You could do them in any order. And then Nadia and Aiden, my novella that I put out a couple of years ago. That's probably one. It's been one of the ones that had like the best sales. If I don't count Chad and Accounting, with all the friends and family sales I got when it was like, oh, Matt wrote a book. Nadia and Aiden's probably the one that sold the best since then. That's also one that people really enjoy. It's a shorter read, so it makes it a little bit better. And then of course Bainbridge, right? My short action novel. That's available as well. So any books that people want to pick up, I always appreciate that. All right, why don't we have John from Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures play in our theme song, and then when we come back, Todd Liebenow from Forgotten Filmcast and Cartoon Breakdown is going to be on, and we're going to be looking at Strike Commando. Hey everyone, welcome back to the DTVC podcast. As always, this is Matt here, and we're joined once again by a special guest. We've got Todd Liebenow from Forgotten Filmcast. Welcome back, Todd.
Hello, Amerikanski. It's good to be here.
Yes, exactly. Yes, we're going to be talking about some Strike Commando here in just a bit here, which yes, yes, he's got such fragile bones. Yes, exactly. But one thing I wanted to ask about, because a couple years ago when you were on, you mentioned enjoying the original Supergirl, and the new one just came out this weekend. So I was kind of curious to see what your thoughts were on that one.
Yeah, I did get to go see it. I am a non-apologetic fan of the 1984 Helen Slater film. That's one that I put in the category of bad movies that I love. So I can't say that it's like I'm a big fan of the character. I mean, I'm not a big comic book person. I don't follow all the lore and all that kind of stuff, but I have always had a special place in my heart for that original film. I did go see the new one this weekend, and I think it's fine. I mean, I wasn't, overly negative or positive on it. I just had kind of a pleasant time at the movies with it. I think it's kind of it's not an earth-shattering story, put it that way, which is, I think, a little odd for, you know, trying to build up the new version of the DC universe on film. This is the second outing on the big screen, and it's a story that seems very kind of off to the side. It's not, things shaking up our world or all that. It's all off of Earth and all that. So, it seemed a little bit of an odd choice, but I mean, I thought it was perfectly fine as a little off-world superhero story. I liked Millie Alcock as Supergirl, and so I don't have really any huge complaints about it or any huge praises either. It was just kind of middle of the road.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. It was like at least it had a nice floor, I guess you could say, right? Like it wasn't a complete bust. And like you said, there's nothing you can really complain about it with. But I think to your point about it being an off-world kind of thing, and also the comic book story it took from. I read a little bit about it because I was curious, like, oh, what was this Supergirl? I think it was Woman of Tomorrow, I think it was called, or something like that.
Yeah.
But it was taking from True Grit, which of course we know True Grit.
Oh yeah.
Right. It's told from the story of the young woman. And so here they were trying to split the difference between the comic that was told from the standpoint of the young woman versus this movie that's trying to introduce us to Millie Alcock. And we kind of, we lose a little bit of both, I guess, in that.
Yeah, when I was watching this, I mean, with no familiarity about the comic origins of this story, yeah, I'm sitting there in the theater going, it's the superhero version of True Grit, absolutely. And I enjoy both of the film versions of True Grit immensely. I think they're both wonderful films. So yeah, it was interesting to look at from that point of view. I will say I did really really like Lobo, and this again, this is a character that I don't have familiarity with, not being someone that's too deep into comics themselves. I really knew nothing about this character. When I hear the name Lobo, I think, oh, Sheriff Lobo, BJ and the Bear, right?
Yes.
Give me that movie, Sheriff Lobo.
Yes.
Um, but I liked this character a lot. I was sitting there thinking, oh well, I mean, this character deserves his own movie. This is fun. So that's definitely a direction I'd like to see them go next.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, because Lobo was a character that DC brought in like the late 80s, early 90s as like he was supposed to be a commentary on all of the anti-heroes that Marvel had, like Wolverine and Punisher and Daredevil, I guess, just to that
Little Ghost Rider in there, I was
Ghost Rider,
guessing. Yeah.
exactly. Ghost Rider, all yes, exactly. And what they discovered was is that even though he was supposed to be a joke on anti-heroes, that actually he was the one that kind of brought Marvel fans that were into the anti-heroes into into back and forth to DC. So he ended up being successful as an anti-hero, despite the fact that he was a spoof on anti-heroes. And I think I remember was I was collecting comics in like the early '90s, late '80s, early '90s, and I went, I'd go to this flea market to buy comics every Sunday, and the Lobo issue 1 said 99 cents on it, and the guy didn't have a price tag on the actual comics. I was like, "Oh, is that 99 cents?" He's like, "Oh, no, it's actually like $3." I was like, "Okay, well, I had like $10 for my allowance, so I couldn't afford much more than that." And he's like, "But I'll give it to you for $1 then." And so, my grandfather, who's like, big haggler and all that stuff, thought it was like the greatest thing ever that his grandson had like haggled this guy down from $3 to $1.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a role that was very well suited to Jason Momoa. I there's a part of me that when they start these new versions, when they decide, oh, okay, we're done with this run of movies, we're gonna go this direction. There's a part of me that bristles a little bit when they bring in the same people that they previously used in a different role. But I mean, this was a role that was perfect for him, so I like that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And, I think one of the things that was so, I guess, charming about the original Supergirl that this movie doesn't have is her interacting with Earth when she first gets here. And
Yes.
I never want to give a movie a hard time for being short. I appreciated that this was a cool hour and 48 minutes. I was
Yep.
very shocked when the credits rolled and I looked at my phone and was like, "Whoa, okay, I've got plenty of time to run errands after this." But I think that was a whole thing that she was supposed to be this fish out of water living in Earth, and she doesn't think it's her home. There could have been a lot more than just her looking out the window and listening to music on her Walkman. That I thought the original Supergirl did a much better job with that of Helen Slater, fish out of water, sort of learning her way around Earth when she gets there.
Yeah. I mean, that to me are the best moments of the original film. I think that sequence where she first arrives on Earth, catapults out of the water because, Argo City is in inner space, quote, not, whatever. Okay, she pops out of the water. But then she spends all this time kind of discovering her powers there, and gradually she figures out how to fly and all this stuff. And there's something just really charming about that sequence. And that's the moment of the film I always point to when people go, "Oh, this movie is garbage. It's terrible story, and you've got all these big name actors and actresses that are hamming it up and chewing the scenery. It's just awful." And I always say, yeah, but Helen Slater is giving it all she's got. This is her first role. She's like, I gotta nail it here. And she does. And that scene where she's discovering her powers is just so lovely. And I think, that's the scene that, if you question whether there is anything worthy in that 84 film, that's the scene I would point you to.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think this movie, the new one, could have stood to do a little bit more of that. It could have,
Mhm.
that had flashback moments that it could have padded to. I mean, Earth, let's be frank, Earth is not the nicest place to have to move to I mean, granted, there's the kryptonite coming out of the ground that's killing you, like Argo City was, but still, it's like there's a lot of, violence and depravity and all that kind of stuff. And here's Clark saying, like, oh, no, humans are actually good, and she could be seeing, but yeah, it seemed like with that original one, one of the things I think just in general was the first Superman, the Richard Donner one, and then Supergirl. They did a good job, I think, of like the origin story piece. And I know Tim Gunn wanted to go away from origin stories for both of these movies, which I think is okay. But I think there's some pieces of it that would be nicer. I mean, this movie had some pieces of it, but I think that was a piece of that original one that this movie completely just skipped over. And I mean, and I do think that Millie Alcock probably could have done as good a job with it as Helen Slater did.
I mean, there is this trend lately of really poo-pooing origin stories, and I get it. When you've seen it a couple times with Spider-Man or what have you. I get that some people are getting annoyed with that, but I'm someone that really likes origin stories. I mean, I'm one of those that, like I said, I'm not deep in the comic world. So like if I want to read a comic book, I kind of want to see the origin story. Like, years ago when my son was young, in the stage when we were doing like bedtime stories and such, I was like, well, let's do some comic books. He's getting into superhero characters. And so what we did, we got the Marvel Unlimited thing online at that point, and we did Fantastic Four, starting from the beginning, the 60s run. And it's because I didn't want to just jump in there. I wanted to see the origin and the progression of things. And we both really got into that together. So, while there is this pushback against origin stories on the movie versions lately, I don't want them to abandon it entirely. I like the origin stories.
Well, because I think, we think of the original Superman. I mean, I don't even think of it necessarily as a superhero movie. It's more, I put it more with like Star Wars and Jaws and like Raiders of the Lost Ark and movies from that period that were kind of these sort of magical film experiences. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, the famous line, right? You'll believe that a man can fly. But the origin story there. I think maybe with Superman, I can maybe when you're making Superman again, maybe you're afraid of doing the origin story again because it was done so well in that first movie. I mean, the scene where he's playing, he's on the football team and he kicks the football like completely out of the stadium. Like he's just because he has to keep his powers down and all of that. And of course, Glenn Ford is so great as
Oh,
Pa
yeah.
Kent.
Yeah.
It's and then you get that moment where a young Lois Lane sees him running, against the train and all that. And so
Hmm.
all those moments, I think they helped build this character that made Christopher Reeve, when we see him walk into Metropol, into the Daily Planet with his glasses on, and he's like stumbling around. It made this whole thing there that worked. And so and again, this movie had more of an origin story, I think, than Superman did, which I appreciated. But I think part of the Supergirl, the Helen Slater one, that part of her, like you said, she gets to know her powers and she's learning what Earth is, and she's here, and then she ends up going to the school with Lois Lane's sister and all of that. It was all part of that made that one so good that this movie decided to skip over.
Well, yeah, I mean, what you're talking about with the 78 Superman there, it's all about that mantra that Donner had, the verisimilitude.
Yeah.
This is Superman in the real world. And I would actually say that, I mean, I think that James Gunn did a solid job in the film we had last year of continuing that, but also still making it a comic book movie. I mean, I think I said on another podcast last year when Superman came out, I was like, you know, there, this is not as concerned with trying to make it be Superman in the real world. This is a comic book story. This is a comic book universe. I mean, we got the first
Right.
film in our new franchise and we've got kaiju in it. I mean,
Right. Right.
the other one, Superman saving a cat from a tree. Okay.
Right.
So, but, I think though we're more accepting now. I mean, in 78, we didn't really have superhero movies at that point. They needed to build that foundation. And nowadays, I mean, looking over at the Marvel universe, a talking raccoon that carries a gun around is normal everyday thing. Okay, so we've kind of moved past that. But at the same time, the Marvel series, I think they built to that. That first Iron Man film, I think was very much kind of in the same type of spirit as the original Donner film was, and you just establishing superheroes in our world. And then they worked their way up to thunder gods and talking trees and all that kind of stuff.
Right, well, because Kevin Feige, the kind of I don't know, what we call the executive producer of all those films, he said that he will watch Superman before they make any new Marvel
Oh,
movie.
yeah. Well,
Yeah, but I think to your point about Iron Man, I think the thing that was crazy about Iron Man was that DC in the 2000s they had that good run with the Christopher Nolan Batman movies, but they were trying to figure out what to do with Superman, and then here comes Kevin Feige, who is only given like this small group of Marvel characters. He doesn't even get the best ones, right? He doesn't get Wolverine
yeah.
or Spider-Man. And so he's like, I'm going to make Iron Man my Superman. And he did it, right? That like, they released the 2013 Superman movie with Henry Cavill, and it did like half of what the third Iron Man movie did that year,
Yeah.
which it's a crazy feat to think about that. But so yeah, Tim Gunn's or sorry, not Tim Gunn. Tim Gunn's the Parsons School of Fair Design
James
guy.
Gunn.
James
Yeah.
Gunn, right? James Gunn. He's probably got his work cut out for him here. But I think this was an interesting choice, not to use Supergirl as the second movie, but I think to use the story he did compared to when the older Supergirl movie. That movie, even though yes, you could make comments about like Faye Dunaway, her poor character, where she's just like this cougar who's like like kind of lasciviously going over a Hart Bachner, and it's just kind of like this gross thing about the older lady wanting the younger man, kind of all those bad tropes in there that she was sort of acting her way through and not very happy about it either. So it's not like that movie was perfect, but I think it had some elements to it that I think that the new one could have used a little bit more of, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you there. I mean, I think if you go see the new Supergirl, which unfortunately it looks like a lot of people aren't, they're kind of waiting on it. It's not doing terribly well this weekend. But I mean, I think it's an interesting enough movie. It's a fun time. I think that it helps to go into it kind of understanding that, yeah, this is not like the next piece of the puzzle, so to speak. This is just a Supergirl story, so.
Yeah, I think Supergirl too, in herself, I mean, she was kind of I don't want to say she was an afterthought character, but it was kind of like they almost made the character because they were afraid Marvel would make their own Superwoman or Supergirl. It's like, well, we want to have the
Sure.
rights to her. But like, I was looking at her because I was like, well, who is her big main villains? And she really didn't have any. Her villains were more like just Superman's villains.
Hmm.
And and so it is kind of a difficult thing to find. Like they probably were having trouble finding a story that they wanted to latch onto, but maybe again, like the old Supergirl where it was an original story that they came up with. And I think that one also was supposed to be a part of what a Superman 3 was supposed to be, right? That was supposed to be
Yeah.
Brainiac and Supergirl, and they ended up scrapping that, and then the Supergirl movie had to change, and of course the budget was bad on that, so they had to change it again. But I think, you know, um, Supergirl's a character that like everybody knows her. I'd say after Wonder Woman, she's probably like the or maybe Batgirl, right? Would be the most known DC, female star. But also, I think just overall superheroes of DC, everybody knows Supergirl. But yeah, she doesn't. She wasn't always fleshed out. I know they killed her off. I think the year after Supergirl came out, they killed her off in the comics.
Mm.
So it was a challenging one to tackle as the second one, but I think also James Gunn kind of wanted to do what that original Supergirl movie was supposed to do, which was to build out the Superman world more. And unfortunately, after Superman 3, they decided they weren't going to build that world out anymore. And so
Yeah, yeah.
that movie got orphaned there.
I mean, I do like, and I don't want to spoil things, but I do like where the film ends things. There's a really nice moment where we have Supergirl has gone through this whole adventure and kind of comes to terms or at least is moving further down the path when it comes to adjusting to the trauma that she's gone through in terms of losing her home, losing her family, adjusting to this new place on Earth, and kind of dealing with what her role is going to be when it comes to being someone who has extraordinary abilities in this world. So I think that part of things certainly does kind of lay down some things that I'm sure we'll see further develop as things go on. That I thought was a nice little touch at the end there.
Yeah, I agree. It definitely ended in a good place, and I think, kind of excited for what the next Superman movie is going to be because I think that, she'll probably be involved
Oh,
in it
yeah.
more. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'll always be excited for this stuff. I mean, I'm if you're gonna do Superman or I mean, really any superhero, I'm there. I want to see what you do with it. That is just intriguing to me, bringing these things from the comic book page to the big screen. Keep going. Bring me Plastic Man though. Eventually, James Gunn. That's what I want to see.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Well, I'm excited to also that they're gonna, it looks like in the next couple of years, Wonder Woman, they're going to bring her, and I think, she's always been that DC, like the third. I always consider her the third of the DC
Yeah.
ones, with Superman and Batman, but she just always got left out, except for the TV show, of course, the iconic Linda Carter TV show.
Hmm.
It was like Batman and Superman were kind of trade, right, where it's like you get Superman first. He kind of fades out. Or actually, technically, it was Batman in the '60s, Superman in the '50s. Kind of that thing. And when there was that period of time, I don't know, there was never really a sense of like DC wanting to do anything. I think they tried with Green Lantern, but really they never really branched out beyond Superman and Batman until Marvel kind
Right.
of laid down the gauntlet for
Yeah.
them. And
Yeah.
you know,
Well, and with the Wonder Woman thing, people love to be like, oh, well, they wouldn't do it because it's a female character, and they have this idea in their heads that nobody wants to see female characters. I always kind of say, that's baloney, okay? In my heart, all right, and I'm not going to say that '70s Linda Carter series was anything close to being, the most amazing television achievement ever. Okay. But I do think Linda Carter was very iconic in that role. I think that she definitely presented a challenge because anytime there would be talk of, oh, they're going to do a Wonder Woman movie and here's who they might cast, there's a part of me that would always sit there and go, all right, but she's no Linda Carter. You know what I mean? And so, so yeah.
yeah. Well, because I think Superman, it took a couple go rounds. I think it was, the Brandon Ruth one, I think was the first one after that, and people really rejected that.
Mhm.
They weren't going to do Brandon Ruth as Superman. And then Zack Snyder's one was supposed to be a darker version of Superman. And I think it was divorced enough from the Christopher Reeve one. The problem was, I think those first two Christopher Reeve movies were just so good that it was hard to look at those new ones and say, okay, well, what do we do? This isn't necessarily what I want my Superman to be. And I
Yeah.
think James Gunn's got the advantage now of like, okay, we've gone through a few iterations now of Superman. Okay, now people might be able to accept because Batman was different, right? Batman was like nobody thought of Michael Keaton as Christopher
Hmm.
Reeve, and so when Val Kilmer took over, people were like, okay, let's see what Val Kilmer can do. Let's see what George Clooney can do. And
Well, and I think the thing with these other Superman versions too is like, yes, you've got a hard act to follow with Christopher Reeve, and I think that the Brendan Routh one, Bryan Singer directing, tried too much to be in Donner's world. In fact,
yeah,
I think he was trying to do a sequel to Donner's stuff. And then the Snyder stuff was going way too far away from that. Whereas I think with last year's Superman, I think James Gunn found the right balance of honoring the tradition that Donner started and then trying to do something that was new and more rooted in comic book mythology.
yeah, I agree. I think, especially when he said like, maybe being nice. I think is that what the line was? Maybe being nice is the real punk rock or something.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yes, it's like, okay, that's Christopher Reeve's Superman right there.
Mhm.
But yeah, and I think too, those first two Superman movies, between the fact that you have Gene Hackman as well as Lex Luthor, and I think again, we've had a couple Lex Luthors in between that we were able to kind of get out of our system to be like, okay, we can start with a new Lex Luthor now. Obviously Terrence Stamp as Zod. Yeah, those movies were just so. I mean, again, movies at that time. There's so many you could put Superman in with Raiders of the Lost Ark or Back to the
Mhm.
Future, or Jaws. It's just like you could kind of put them all in a group together in the Star Wars movies at that time. Whereas now it's like comic book movies are their own thing, and
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Superman was this cultural touchstone. It was one of those things that is just such a vivid memory for me of going to the movies when I was a kid. I've talked about this before on other podcasts that going to see the original Superman in the theater in 1978 is probably the most vivid movie-going memory of my childhood, more so than even Star Wars. I remember everything about that experience. I remember the theater I went to. I remember it was in December when it opened, so it was snowing when I went. And I remember a lot of the emotions that were going through me at the time. Like the destruction of Krypton was one of the most terrifying things that 9-year-old me, actually, I wasn't even nine, I was 7-year-old me had ever seen, so yeah.
Yeah, no, that I mean, for me as a kid, I mean, the only one that I really remember being in the theater, of course, was the fourth one,
Oh, gee.
right, exactly. And so I remember, and, the kind of the funny thing that I remember was that you had that fourth one, and I remember that being, ads everywhere, and just like the adults around me, like my parents or whoever else, just were like this. They weren't even like talking about possibly bringing me to see it, right? There was just no conversation about that. But then Batman comes out in '89, and I used to watch the old Batman with my dad on Sunday mornings.
Uh-huh.
And so my parents, it was PG-13. My parents got me a ticket for it, and I was completely freaked out. I was, what, 10, 11 or something like that, when that one came out. I was completely freaked out. But I do remember Superman. Superman was one of those movies that would either be on TV or also, growing up in Maine where you get near the holiday breaks, teachers didn't like to do anything that week before, so they would show us movies. And Superman was one of those movies that they would show us. And so
Oh yeah.
it,
Well, and when Superman was on TV and Superman 2 for that matter, they were big events.
yes.
They'd add back in footage that they cut out. They'd make it a 2-night event.
Yeah, that was always kind of an amazing, especially around the holidays. I mean, obviously, Star Wars is the most famous one that was on during the holidays, but yeah, those movies that were Raiders of the Lost Ark was another one that I remember being on. That they like you said, they'd be these events where it was like, they were kind of done with, like the sitcoms would be on breaks or whatever, or they would, but
Yeah.
whatever, the mid-season breaks or however they wanted to do that, and they would show all these movies at that time, and it was a way that, like, yeah, so it was kind of funny because, like, yeah, these movies that you saw in the theater for me, that those were my experiences. Eventually we had a friend who they had more money. They had HBO and a VCR, and so they
Hmm.
would tape everything that came out when it got on HBO. So a lot of movies that I saw was that way. We'd borrow them. There'd be like a super long play with 3 movies on it, and there'd be
Yeah,
one that
yeah.
you'd want and the two you didn't want, but it didn't matter. So,
Right,
yeah.
right. Well, I mean, we used to tape all those movies when they played on network TV. I mean, that's a thing that, you know, young people today, you don't know about anymore. When they used to, that was a regular thing, the ABC Sunday night movie, and you would
Yeah.
have the world television premiere of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan or whatever, and that was a big deal. We stayed home and watched that, and we put on the VCR so we could watch it again the next day. It's
Yes.
different
Yeah.
time.
Right. It was such a big deal. Yes. And the funny thing about Supergirl was that because that one didn't do so well, it was almost like the kind of the lesser independent channels that, would normally be like, I mean,
Mm,
TV 38 in Boston did play Superman, and again, similar thing. It was like a special event, the same way, like, it'd be like a 2-night event for Gone with the Wind or something like that. They would do that. But Supergirl was like a weekend afternoon kind of thing that you would catch because it was almost like,
yeah.
oh, we've got the Superman intellectual property that we can use, but we don't have to pay for like we do with the other Superman movies.
I mean, Supergirl, like Warner Brothers didn't even end up releasing it in the end. It was somebody else. And like, even they didn't put it on Warner Brothers home video. It was some other label. And remember, it had that big chunky box, it was
Yes.
like huge. It was like the size of a shoebox. And it was like, yeah.
Yeah, it's finally on HBO Max. So I know in 2024, when I was doing the Superman movies, it wasn't included on HBO Max, but it is on there now. So, and I
Mhm.
think maybe they're seeing like they can get a little bit of a bump because people might be interested from seeing I mean, I don't know if they're going to get like an asylum effect of people thinking like, oh, it's already on, Supergirl's already on, it's streaming. Let's get,
It's the guy from Die Hard in here.
exactly.
What's that?
Right, right, exactly, exactly. Yeah.
Booby!
Right. Yeah. Oh, that is another one of the weird parts because she's supposed to be like in high school. Well, I guess she's supposed to be in high school, I think, right? Or is she in
Yeah,
college?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, high school, yeah.
Yeah, and she's dating Hart Bachner, so that was a little bit of a weird part there too. But um, yeah, but
Max
over.
Headroom as a creepy guy in the alley
That's
trying to mess with her. Yeah.
yes, exactly. Yeah, it again. I do, and I don't know if they watched the original when they made the new one, but I do think there are parts of that movie that to your point, like especially when she's discovering her powers. I mean, and then just to give people, this is maybe a little bit of a spoiler, but she doesn't go through that whole finding out her powers thing in the new one. It's just
No.
essentially he goes, "Your powers are going to kick in now," and then it cuts away to her in an apartment somewhere.
I will say though, I did like the the kind of the thread we have through this movie of, she goes to various places. And so we see how different types of planets, how they affect her powers, because the whole yellow sun, red sun, what have you type of a thing. So, every time we're in a new location and they establish that with a name on the screen and such, it tells what kind of sun it has, because that's going to impact whether or not she can use her powers. So,
Yes, yeah, which is interesting, right? Because you've got the yellow sun, which is our sun, the red sun, which is her sun, and then the green sun. And so yeah, all of them have because that's another area, I guess, of Superman that we don't usually explore because he's usually just in the yellow sun here.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that is kind of a fun idea of Supergirl in space, traveling around in a spaceship and all of that. I think is definitely a cool concept. But yeah, I mean, in a way, it's kind of like Superman 2, right? Where he goes into the Fortress of Solitude and he has his powers taken away.
Hmm.
And I mean, I still remember that scene as a kid when he's at the diner and that guy beats the crap out of him, and
Yeah.
you're just like, oh, when is that guy going to get his comeuppance? And then so, that scene when he's sitting next to me, he's like, oh, that's funny, garbage eating garbage, and then,
Uh-huh.
yeah, and he spins him around like really fast on the bar. So they kind of pull a little bit from that, I guess, when the fact that she kind of almost purposely diminishes her own power so she can get drunk, essentially. But it's a
Right.
similar
Yeah.
idea.
The thing I always remember about that scene from Superman 2 is actually the early version when he does get beat up, and
Yeah.
how surprised he is to see his own blood,
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Because she has the same moment when she gets hit
Yeah.
by, yeah, she's
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm bleeding. Look at that. But she's drunk when she says it. So, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's, yeah. And I guess in a way, this is to some extent the sequel, it is kind of a sequel, but kind of not. It's still its own movie as well.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. So, but I agree with you. I think people should go see it. But like you said, I mean, I do my what Chris the Brain at Bulletproof, he calls it my senior citizen matinee. I go to like as early as I can. This was at 10 in the morning. Actually, Jackass was playing at 9 in the morning in the next theater over, which I couldn't believe that. I got there a little early because you just never know with Philadelphia public transit, what time you're going to get there. So I ended up getting there a half hour early, and Jackass was playing. I was like, I can't imagine doing Jackass at 9 in the morning. That just seems like
All the senior citizens that are Jackass fans got
right,
to get out
exactly.
there to the first show, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But yeah, I would say for the showing that I went to, it was like maybe 10 people in the theater, which that's pretty low for a first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mine wasn't big either. Now, I typically go on Friday afternoons,
Hmm.
because my work schedule is such that it allows me to do that on Fridays. And though I didn't pick a regular show, I had a conflict, at the time that I would normally go, like right after lunch. So I went a little later, and the one that lined up best for me was a 3D showing, which I tend to
Okay.
avoid those. But this was what worked out best. And since I do the AMC A-list or whatever, it doesn't cost me anything more or whatever to do the 3D. So I did it. And yeah, I mean, I would say we had a dozen people in there, at 2 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. Not the peak time, I recognize, but it was a lot more when I went to see Toy Story 5 the previous week.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Toy Story 5, I could hear kind of what was going on there. And I think that might be part of it too, is that, the comic book movie fan kind of that kind of made MCU so big, they were a lot of them were born like in the late 80s, early 90s, and that's the Toy Story age as well, and so they're
Yeah,
in their third.
they're all taking their kids now, and so yeah, and the next few weeks there is going to be big on the kids fair because we
Yeah.
had Toy Story 5 last week. We've got Minions and Monsters coming up this week, and then Moana coming up after that. So it's going to be all about the kids here the next few weeks.
Yeah, and I think a lot of parents are saying, Supergirl, I'll wait till HBO Max, but which I think is too bad. But I think, hopefully it establishes enough because I mean, you think of the MCU, most of those movies didn't do that great either. And but by the time they got to the Avengers, the sixth movie, and that one, outperformed the third Batman movie that year.
Hmm.
And but you look at like that Captain America movie that was really, people think of it as a really big movie, but it didn't do that well financially. It's kind of, I think it did like 400 million or something. It's like always lower on the list of, of Marvel movies, but it created something. It created
Right,
a
right.
buzz for Chris Evans as that character. So maybe that's enough here. Maybe the number isn't the most important thing.
Yeah. Speaking of Captain America.
I know. Interesting segue there. Exactly. That's a perfect segue there because I was gonna, we're talking about Strike Commando here, and the star of that, Reb Brown. He wasn't a Steve Rogers Captain America, but he was a Captain America nonetheless.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I always remember that film. I mean, that was one that uh it 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 never got much of a theatrical release. Certainly not where I was in the Chicago area. I think it may have gotten to some parts of the country, but it was one of those where we saw the poster up for ages and ages. It's like, oh yeah, there's a Captain America movie coming. Look, here's a poster with a big shield on it and all that. It's coming, it's coming. And then suddenly one day it's sitting there on the shelf at Blockbuster, and you're like, oh, okay, I guess it didn't come to the theater. And when when we saw it, it was very underwhelming. I mean, basically, Captain America's big superpower in that movie is the ability to fake car sickness. So,
And he said in an interview, I think actually it was when that the first Chris Evans Captain America came out, he was interviewed because I guess he said I think he lives in the Vegas area because another guest that we have on, Rich Pierce, had talked to him when he was in college writing about movies, and so I think he might be in the Vegas, or he may not be now, but he might have been then. But he took like a group of kids to see the movie, and he was dressed up with his Captain, not with the actual Captain America outfit, but like a T-shirt and everything.
uh,
And he said when they made those movies that they were trying to sell it as a TV show,
uh,
and I guess they want. I can't remember if it was. I don't know exactly how it works. I think it was like CBS buying episodes. They were going to pay like a lot less than what they paid for a Hulk episode, I think is what it was. And it just wasn't worth it financially for them to make the show if CBS wasn't going to, which CBS at that time is again kind of a funny thing for younger people listening. CBS didn't want to be known as the comic book channel. So
oh yeah, they had the Flash around that time, didn't they? Yeah. So
yeah, Shazam. They turned down Doctor Strange as well. There was
oh yeah, yeah. I remember there was a TV movie or something like that. Yeah.
yeah, that was supposed to. So it was like they were like, Wonder
Well, and
Woman
the
and
the
Hulk is enough.
Incredible Hulk was on right before the Dukes of Hazzard. That was Friday nights, man. Incredible Hulk, Dukes of Hazzard.
Yeah, and then you had Wonder Woman as well, and I guess there was the Spider-Man show. I remember as a kid, again similar to like talking about with Supergirl being on weekend afternoons, they would package two episodes to make movies of
Yes.
those.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and of course, with Reb Brown and his filmography, the the one that jumps out at me as I look through what he's done, of course, is Howling 2,
yes,
which I mean, that is a trip. If you have never seen that
yes.
Howling 2, um, it's a movie that well, I let's put it this way. The most memorable thing about Howling 2 is the end credits sequence where they cut back and forth between the credits rolling to repeating a shot of Sybil Danning bursting her blouse open and baring her breasts. So,
Yes. Yeah. So I talked about, I think in the early iteration of my podcast where I had my co-host Jamie, she had a podcast called Liking It, where she talked about werewolves. And so we talked about Howling 2, and I was like, oh, Howling 2 is my favorite werewolf movie of all time. Cause I just, it's just so good. She's like, her response was, I'm sorry. I was like, okay. I was like, she's just fun. But yeah, there's so much in that is just so between the Civil Dead and Christopher Lee, of course, with like the Pizza Hut glasses that he's wearing, sunglasses.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, what a trip.
Howling 3 though. I mean, check that one. Howling
Yes.
3 actually is fairly solid. It's the weird one that has like the marsupial werewolves and
Right. Yes.
stuff.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I mean, the other thing with Reb Brown, the funny thing is, I mean, I saw him, obviously, Space Mutiny on MST3K. That was the big
uh-huh.
one. Some of these movies here, like Strike Commando. But, my wife and I would watch a lot of, retro TV on like, whether it was like MeTV or also Logo would show old episodes of Three's Company. And you'd see Reb Brown just pop up from time to time, and he'd play like some like big, like Three's Company. I think he played a girl that Jack was dating's older brother, who was just
Mm.
essentially going to beat the crap out of Jack, and so Jack had to like hide, and they were like trying to hide him in different places and stuff like that. And it's like that was kind of this thing that Reb Brown would do. And so these movies here were like his way of being the star, I guess. That there was no Three's Company episode that was going to let him do what he did in Strike Commando.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at his TV credits, I mean, yeah, he's on like just about every major series, in some guest role, through the mid 70s to mid to late 80s. I mean, I'm just skimming over it here and I'm seeing $6 Million Man, Rockford Files, Chico and the Man, Happy Days, Fantasy Island, Three's Company, Alice, Facts of Life, Love Boat, Miami Vice. So,
Right.
yeah.
I think he was a biker with John Matuzak, who was in One Man Force, and Goonies, of course. I think they were
Mhm.
bikers on that Miami Vice episode.
Yeah, yeah, no, the episode title I see here, Viking Bikers from Hell.
That's right. Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of amazing. It's like, and I guess for like the foreign audience, because like this movie here, Strike Commando, I first saw this when Simon Miller, who has the site Explosive Action, and he actually has a YouTube channel where he showcases his music in movie collection. He got Japanese VHSs of these movies, and he sent me DVD rips of those. So like the version that I had hard-coded Japanese subs in it when I watched
Oh,
it.
wow.
And I mean, now you've got the Severin version on Tubi, which just looks so much nicer. I'm
Hmm.
not to cast any aspersions. I was really appreciative, and I think he knows too. Like, it's nice to have these cleaned up versions versus the Japanese VHS. But these movies used to not be very easy to find, but now you've got companies like Severin that are making an effort to get them out there, and suddenly people like Reb Brown, more people know of them.
Yeah, I mean it's great to see this stuff getting out there and being easily accessible. And I especially appreciate it when, like, if you are the type of person that wants to shell out the dough for a nice deluxe Blu-ray copy of Strike Commando, you can certainly do that. Or if you're just the one you want to catch it on Tubi, it's there for you and it still looks very nice as well on there. So, I mean, I appreciate that.
Right? Yeah, I agree.
Because while I
Yeah,
will shell out cash for some stuff, I don't know if that Strike Commando is on my list when it comes to this.
no, no, I totally get it. No, I'm the same way. I think, the thing about Tubi is that you can watch it, you got commercials, so you can feel like you're still supporting it. It's not
Yeah,
like you're getting a
yeah.
bootleg or something. And I think it's a great option to have that. I think it's nice. Tubi's a great option for a lot of these because, I know for me, we live in a small apartment and I've got no room for any. It's like if I bought every DVD, I was at a used bookstore the other day and I was looking through the DVDs and I didn't see much, but I saw Broken Flowers, the Jim Jarmusch movie.
Oh yeah.
But I was like, I hadn't seen it before, and I'd heard from some people that they didn't like it, and I was like, well, do I want to spend $2 if I'm not going to like it too? Because what am I going to? I'm going to have to go donate it or something. Like, what am I going to do with this
Yeah.
DVD?
See, that's my philosophy. Okay. I go to these stores and I see this stuff there and I go, oh, look at that. I can get this for $4 or whatever. It's maybe about the same or a little less than if I were to rent it on Amazon or whatever. But you know what? I'll watch it one time. And then one day when I've gone through enough of these DVDs, I'm gonna go over to the used DVD shop over in Aurora, or I'll go up into Denver where the Vinegar Syndrome store is. I'll cash a bunch of those in. They'll give me some credit. I'll get something else that I really want. I win. So
Yeah, that's a good idea. I never thought I could maybe try to do something like that too. I just, yeah, and the thing is, because I was thinking like, well, I could, because it's not available to rent, I don't think, or maybe it's available to rent, so it would be cheaper to have bought the $2 DVD. But I was like, I can get it at the library. But then I realized that like none of the branches of the library within walking distance have it. So I'd have to take the subway, which a subway trip would also be more than the $2. So it's like,
Oh, I
yeah,
see. Our libraries they'll move them to various places. They have all this
oh,
interlibrary loan stuff. I mean, I've I've gotten stuff from, like I'm in the Denver area, but I've gotten stuff from way over on the Western Slope in Grand Junction or something like that, because that's the
wow.
only place that had it, and they just shipped it over, and that was that. So yeah.
I wonder if I should try that. Maybe I should see if I can request it. And because this isn't quite so far as Grand Junction to Denver. This is
No,
just
you're much more compact there,
right,
you
yeah,
know.
exactly. Yeah, this is just within I'm looking just within like the city library system, which I mean, the one thing about Philadelphia is the county is the city, so it does go out pretty
Yeah.
far, but not quite. Yeah, again, not quite Denver to Grand Junction. So yeah,
Hey,
you're right.
I've always said, not to get off on too much of a tangent here, but you folks out east don't have a real concept of what, really far away means. I mean, like I remember going once to I was doing a seminar once in Providence, Rhode Island, and this guy came up to me. He's like, "Oh, this is really great. We're really glad you came to do this, but it was such a long drive. Do you maybe do one in like Hartford?" And I was like, "Are you kidding me? Providence and Hartford? I mean, that's like that's like Denver to Colorado Springs. I mean, that's nothing, you know."
Yes. Yeah, it's funny. Because growing up in Maine, it's funny. Maine, if you go north of where I grew up, and you can essentially go the same distance north, and if you go south, you go through like three or four states. But if you go north, it's just Maine. So like Mainers are more used to it because you can go 5 or 6 hours.
Sure.
But like, yeah, Colorado, I was out in Colorado, I was hiking with my friend in 2012 and I got altitude sickness. He wanted to hike, I think it was Mount Princeton, and we slept overnight at like 12,000 feet. And I woke up in the morning and I was
Mhm.
just like, I can't move. So we just kind of drove around and we went from, I mean, so we flew into Denver, we drove out to like Leadville, down to like, some of those other areas. I think we did get out to Grand Junction to go because I can't remember, or that might have been a different trip. But then we went all the way down to like Mesa Verde National Park and all the way over
Yeah.
to Four
Yeah.
Corners.
Cortez. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we brought the rental back, we discovered we did about 1,600 miles that week,
Hmm.
just going around. Yeah, and it's like, yeah, 1,600 miles. I don't even know what that would get you in this, the Northeast, like how many states you could go through in that period of time. Like it's like I think it's like 350 between here and Philadelphia to Boston.
Yeah.
So I mean that just gives you a sense right there for how many different places you're going through there. Yeah. Now I was trying to think with this movie here. I mean, maybe it's good. I'll do a quick synopsis, and then maybe
Yeah.
we can kind of walk through certain scenes of it. I mean,
Hmm.
again, this is your standard. I don't say Rambo ripoff is the right term to use for it. But it's Italian directed. It's directed by Bruno Mattei or Bruno Mattei. He filmed in the Philippines, and our hero. Reb Brown. I was trying to blank on Reb Brown's name. Well, we were just talking about him, but anyway. But Reb Brown, he's our hero. His name's Ransom, and he leads a special forces group that gets ambushed, and he's by himself. He eventually makes it back to his crew, and he discovers that the Russians are training the Vietnamese or like the Viet Cong, and so he goes back in to try to get proof. He gets captured. Probably a good chunk of the whole second act is him just being tortured, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
the third act is him getting revenge and him taking everybody out. Of course, there is somebody on the inside who is helping this guy Jakota, who's the Soviet who's training the Viet Cong, and there is somebody on the inside who's helping him. So eventually, he gets all of his revenge, and everybody dies. But yeah, Todd, what did you think of Strike Commando?
I mean, yeah, it's one of those movies that you don't get too far into it, and the brain just focuses on, yeah, this is a Rambo ripoff, or Missing in Action, of course, comes to mind. Though it's weird because it's a movie that never really makes it clear kind of where this is all taking place historically. Eventually, you do kind of figure out that, like, oh, this is supposed to actually be in the Vietnam War. So, this is a 1987 movie, and they're trying to convince you that it's like, 1971 or two or something like that. And it's like, yeah, no, you're not quite selling me on that. Especially when they get to the end and you have that moment where it says present day on the screen and you're like, oh, okay, we've jumped forward 15 years now and everybody looks the same and it's not at all different. There's no effort to make it look like this is the early 70s. Um, and part of it too is just that you're thinking Rambo, and Rambo was taking place in the 80s going back to Vietnam. This is not a go back to Vietnam. They are in the midst of the Vietnam War, though the entire war seems to be being fought by Reb Brown. There's not a lot of other US forces around there. But yeah, I mean, it's basically the meat of this movie is just shoot at stuff. They all wiggle and fall to the ground, and we move on and do that again. We may blow up a few buildings here and there. I mean, there's just not much of a story here at all. Not that you really need it, but it's kind of one of those movies where I'm sitting there watching it and going, what is the goal again? I've really lost what the goal is here. I guess it doesn't matter because it's just bang bang bang. That's what this movie is all about.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and it's funny because Bruno Mattei everybody says Bruno Mattei, but I remember there was a baseball player named Matt Manti, and so that's why I always say Bruno Mattei, but I think it might be Bruno Mattei. But he does a lot of these, and to your point, there is no real reason why for whatever reason, I guess he feels like they had to be set during Vietnam, that they all had to take place in Vietnam. But he never really cared that much about the fact that the clothes that people were wearing. I wonder, I mean, he's Italian. I wonder if he thought like the Filipino people in the area, that their clothes were out of date. And he thought, well, if they're out of date, they're close enough to 71. But it's like, no, their clothes were out of date by like early 80s standards, if they were out of date at all.
Hmm.
They weren't I mean, and it's not like I'm telling him anything, right? He was older, so he knew that 1971 was not disco and, it's like 1971 was the 60s essentially, the late 60s. It was clothing was different there. But he never really cared about that. You see characters that are all dressed in what is essentially 80s clothing
Yeah.
during that period, and he just kind of went with it.
They all look very 80s in this. I mean, Reb Brown, just the way he presents himself, the hair especially, you go, oh yeah, this is the 80s. And then there's like, other things here and there. There's the one guy with the evil colonel or whoever it is, the African American guy who wears that red headband, and you're
Yes.
going, dude looks like he just stepped out of Breaking 2 Electric Boogaloo. This does not look like 72 or whatever.
Yeah, now he is a classic because we get kind of in that opening scene. So, in that opening scene where they're supposed to be doing the raid on the arms depot, and then the main I guess the main kind of head guy played by Christopher Connolly, Raddick, he pulls the plug on it. But you've got Christopher Connolly in that scene, and then the guy you talk about with the red headband, that's well, he's listed as James Gaines in the movie, but he's Jim Gaines, and he does a ton of these movies. And then Mike Monty is the guy who is the major who's more on
Mhm.
Ransom's side. And so
Yeah.
you get this one shot of the three of them in one shot together like that. That's almost like kind of like you're seeing Philippine, when the Vietnam War and the Philippines royalty right there, all together
Uh-huh.
in one
Yeah.
scene like that, which is great. But yeah, Jim Gaines, he did I want to say it was like the first or second Gary Daniels movie. That it was what was it called? Secret of King Mahi's Island. I believe he directed it just because there was nobody else around to direct it, and they just kind of were like, okay, he's like, I'll direct it. Fine, we'll get this movie made. Yeah.
Christopher Connolly, every time I see him pop up in things, I think he looks like oh, what's his face? Oh shoot, Roger Waters from Pink
Yes.
Floyd. He
Yes.
looks like grumpy old Roger Waters, you know.
Yes, that's perfect. That's perfect. I never thought about that before, but now I'll never be able to unsee it. So yeah, that's great. Yes. Yeah, and I mean he is, he kind of can vary in the kind of parts that he plays in these movies. But this time, this is like they're not really doing a great job of showing you that he's not corrupt. They're
Right.
like, okay,
Yeah.
And I guess again that's coming from the Rambo 2 with Charles Napier's character in there. He's supposed to kind of be in that mold.
Oh yeah, and the other guy that you mentioned there, Mike Monty, he's
Yeah.
the Troutman, he's
Right.
Richard
Yes.
Crenna, you know.
Yes.
So yeah, they're definitely working from that playbook there. Um, but yeah, I mean, so much of this is just primarily focused on Reb Brown. There's not a whole lot of depth to any of the side characters. This is, just we're gonna put Reb Brown into these different situations where he gets to shoot the gun and eventually torture him. And yeah, the torture sequences, it's rough. There's so much going on there. They just and it's all played up so crazily, where you've got like the moments where he's like strapped to the springs from an old bed or whatever, and they're electrocuting him. There's the bit where he's kind of propped out there outdoors sweating it out, being for lack of a better word, crucified. And then you've got the bad guys who come in and are slurping down water and just kind of mock him and all that kind of stuff.
Right. Well, and that's like he's got this other guy with him, and it's kind of funny because so when he gets picked because he gets caught by the because essentially we find out later that he was sold out, and he gets caught by the baddies, and he's thrown in the cell with this kind of spindly character who's kind
Mhm.
of not uh has been there a long time, has been beaten around a lot. And the little guy goes, "Yeah, I think they kept me alive so that they'd get you to talk." And I thought that what that meant was they were going to torture the little guy, and then Reb Brown would talk, and that would be the end of it. No, no, they just keep beating up, just torturing Reb Brown, and like Reb Brown is doing like the weeks on the wall.
Yeah,
And he does like I think 28 days worth of torture. Is that what it's like? I think there was like
yeah,
four
yeah.
sevens, right? I think yeah.
Well,
It,
and
it
I mean, the worst thing in the whole torture bit is when that other guy, spoiler here, I guess, folks,
yeah.
the other guy eventually is killed, and
Yes.
they just leave his body there in the cell. And and as another form of torture because of the smell and all that kind
Right.
of stuff.
Yes.
And I mean, it's got to be the most Italian moment of the whole movie, because I think of those extreme moments that the Italians love to put in their movies. And so just that we get this decaying corpse there stuck in the cell with him is
Right.
just brutal.
Yeah, it's like almost like Matt is taking the concept of these movies, of the Rambo concept, where I mean, obviously, in First Blood Part 2, he gets caught, he has the leeches on him and all that stuff, and all that torture happens there. I mean, this is kind of pulling right from that, and
Hmm.
and it's almost like they're like, well, we're gonna do it 5 times more than that,
Yeah.
it's almost comical in a sense. If it wasn't, it's a dark comical, but it's so over the top.
Yeah, well, and plus leading up to that, you've had some brutal stuff involving the villagers and specifically the kids.
Hmm.
Which I mean that I feel bad saying this because it is a scene that deals with the death of a child, but I just can't resist the "tell me about Disneyland" scene. Um, you know,
Yes, right. Well, also when the kid actually dies, it's hard not to laugh at that too, right? Because he's like, like, oh, tell me about Mickey Mouse, and and there's Rep Brown like, oh, the trees are made of cotton candy, and the genie will grant your wishes. When he's like
right.
crying when he says it,
He says something like there's popcorn everywhere, and all
right?
you have to do is climb a tree to eat it. And I was like, I don't remember going on that ride at Disneyland.
Right,
I mean,
exactly. Yeah, right, exactly.
there, line up here, get your fast pass, climb a tree to eat some popcorn. Yeah,
Right, right, exactly. And
right
so then
next to
with
the Matterhorn.
right, right, exactly. Yeah, yeah. I wonder, if somebody from Disney was watching that and had ideas, but I don't know if there's sanitary issues with trees made out of popcorn, though. That's probably
We
also
gotta get Imagineering on this, man. We need the popcorn trees. They can do the Strike Commando experience there at
exactly the
Disney.
struck. Yes, the Rembrandt, right, with the genie. I guess that the genie they've got now, right? Because you've got the people that
Oh
play the Robin
yeah.
Williams genie, right? That yeah, yeah. So that part they've
That's
got.
That's what we can do. Okay, so it's going to be in Fantasyland there.
Right.
We'll have, the genie there at the entrance welcoming the kids in. Climb the tree here. They've got this whole intricate ladder system and all that. Or oh no, you don't have to do it in Fantasyland. You've already got a huge tree down there in Adventureland, the Swiss Family Robinson. Nobody knows the Swiss Family Robinson tree house anymore. You can take all the stuff down and turn it into a popcorn tree with the genie waiting there to greet all the kids, and they can all have a popcorn party. That's the way to do it right there.
That's yes, that's perfect. I wonder, speaking of Swiss Family Robinson, I wonder if schools still show that for kids again, like during breaks, because I was like, that's when I remember. I think I saw that three times in three different grades. So yeah, so I guess they don't make kids watch those kinds of shows anymore. Maybe my school, not high school, my grade school, middle school, they were more about watching movies, and so
Mhm.
yeah. The one I remember, I was telling somebody about this that Raiders of the Lost Ark, because it was PG-13. They thought, okay, for seventh graders, that shouldn't be too bad, and yeah, they started watching that, and I don't remember what point. I remember at some point it was one of those deals where we had to go home. We had, so the period was over, so we couldn't watch the rest of the movie. And then just for whatever reason, we never went back and watched it again. I think they just realized like this is not like something we should be showing at school. So
I had a band director when I was in middle school, and one of his side hustles is he owned a couple slots in a strip mall. One of them was a liquor store, and then he also had a video store. And when he was doing like sectionals, where he'd take small groups of the band members off and work on something, the rest of us needed something to do, and he'd put on movies, and he would like he'd even put on like he'd make his own versions, so he'd cut out the bad stuff. So like I remember like he put on Police Academy and just cut out the nudity.
amazing. That's amazing. See, why teachers might have tried something like that. I think the thing with Raiders of the Lost Ark is I think they had forgotten. I think they had seen it, in 81, and then 8 or 9 years later, they just didn't think about it. They just, PG-13, yeah, this seems like it'll be fun. And then, people are getting chopped up with propellers and stuff
Oh,
like that. Yeah. It's
wasn't
like,
even PG-13 then. It was PG because
oh, that's
PG-13
right.
didn't come
PG,
till 84. But
that's right. That's right.
that's another good segue there, because speaking of the mechanic getting chopped up with propellers here, I definitely felt like this one bad guy, the bald guy, what was his
Yeah.
name,
Oh,
Jacoda.
Dakota. Yes.
I was like, oh, this guy's based on the mechanic from Raiders of the Lost Ark for sure. I just, even the way he holds himself, and like when he's trying to get Reb Brown to fist fight with him, he's doing that thing where he's like wiggling his fists around and stuff, just like the
Yeah.
mechanic does in Raiders of the Lost Ark. um but this guy is a trip. He's the whole, well, Amerikanski, which I'm like, is that a word? I've never heard that before. I've never heard anybody referred to as Amerikanski. uh but yeah, the guy is, I mean, he's presented as the big bad for much of this, but he really is the type of just look and feel that you'd expect out of like that chief henchman typically. So it was, it is kind of pointing to the fact that you've got this baddie on the inside as well, because you're looking at this guy going, this musclehead can't possibly be the big bad.
Right. Well, and the other thing is that he's got his girlfriend with him, Olga. Um,
Who kind of
and
comes from out of nowhere all of a sudden. It's like, oh wait, there's a girl.
right, exactly. And when our hero finally escapes, he takes her with him, and she ends up falling in love with him. She's like,
Yeah.
oh, and which is kind of a crazy thing too, that she's just, but you kind of figure, with the boyfriend Jakota being kind of a meathead, she probably, not that Reb Brown, I guess, was always going to be a step up from Jakota.
Well, and she threw me a bit at first because they're supposed to be Russians that are
Yeah.
there. But she came off a little bit more as like Euro trashy type of person. Wasn't like, oh yeah, it's Natasha Fatale here. No, she had a different vibe to her and such.
Yes.
But
Well,
but I was bummed that she gets taken out, because
yeah.
it's like I did want to see that continue. It would have been nice if she had actually had a moment to kind of give Dakota some comeuppance or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, the actor who plays her is Louise Comsteeg. So she's but she's of Dutch descent. So that's where you get the European part, I bet,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It's funny, there's this idea that I guess because Dolph Lundgren was good at playing a Russian, that any European can play a Russian. And I mean, I guess Alex Vitale, it's interesting because Alex Vitale, I think somebody was voicing him. I don't think that was his voice.
Yeah, I think probably you're right.
Yeah, right. Because that's the funny thing about Reb Brown is that a lot of his screams were ADR'd after the fact, and I wonder too if that scream that we know him so much for, if that's just always been a product of him being in the studio after
Mm,
ADRing his lines, if that like he never really screams like that on set.
yeah, yeah. There's fun screams where he screams the name Jakota in this film,
Yeah.
especially when he's shooting up that cabin or whatever.
Hmm. Right. Yes, he's like, Jacoda. Yeah. And then, of course, like he's done shooting everything up and then they ambush him, and it's
I
like,
know. I was like, where were all of them? They're just all they're just happen to be hiding behind the bushes at this moment. Nobody's in the cabin right now. They're all sitting there going, he's shooting up the cabin. We sure showed him.
well, 'cause that's one of the things I've noticed about these, especially these Italian ones, these Italian directed, direct to video movies from this time, is it's almost like, a Bruno Mattei or whoever, Enzo Castellari, who, Antonio Margheriti, they had this like I don't know what to say, like a program or like a paradigm, template in mind. And it's like this happens here, and this is always how it's going to be, that these things are going to happen. And it's
Mhm.
almost like, okay, this is the ambush scene. And so like it doesn't matter that that like all these people have somehow figured out that it's like no, this is when they ambush him, so of course they know he's coming, they know in advance, and so he's shooting everything up and then they ambush him. But you're right, for the rest of us watching it, we're like, really, like that's he's just firing here all over the place but doesn't hit anybody. There's it's they're all hiding in the perfect place. It's like, so it's like the formula has to go to such a degree when he's making, and I guess you're making these movies on a budget, you're making them as quick as possible. It's like, yeah, the formula's got to fit a certain way, but when you're watching it, you're like, yeah, it's fitting too well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, at that point in the movie, Ransom kind of fumbles his way through things. It's been set up early in the film how skilled he is. He takes out all these bad guys, quite handedly early on. I mean, creates these huge fireballs blowing up these buildings. Just that's what I love in the opening sequence. It's just, the camera is just panning across building,
Right.
boom, and then the next one, boom. They're just one after another blowing up, blowing up. You go, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. And then when we get to this ambush scene, you're just like, what a dope. you
Right.
know?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing too with those explosions is that like for the most part, I think with the Italian directors, they like to use models for those.
Uh-huh.
But there were definitely moments when they weren't using models. There were definitely ones you looked at and you were like, wow, that's definitely like they either got their hands on something bigger and they wanted to blow it up. Or I mean, there's that scene where Reb Brown is running. And that's definitely Reb Brown running with explosions behind him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, I mean, there's no American. I mean, I don't know how many direct-to-video movies I've seen where you can just, it's obvious that that's not the person running. That's not the actor. Like the face is totally different. And they just don't care because they're just like, we're going to be as safe as possible. Yeah, I wondered how many moments Reb Brown had making these movies where he was just like, are you sure this is safe? Are you sure we can do this?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one thing I think, in the movie's favor, I mean, they do definitely do a solid job of giving you a big scope of things, a level of danger, so to speak. I mean, like I was thinking back to Deadly Prey when I was
Oh, yeah.
watching this one. It's hard not to, just because kind of the look of our lead character is similar, and both basically have a guy out in the wilderness that is, trying to fight off the bad guys. Um, this one, they do a much better job of kind of showing you a bigger scope of things. Whereas like Deadly Prey, as we said when we discussed that film, it feels like it's all being shot within like one open lot of land, and they're just moving the camera around, trying not to get the same tree in the shot again, type of thing. Here you really feel like they're having a good time just kind of making their way across the Philippines and showing you a bunch of different locales. Yes, they all kind of look similar, but you at least feel like they're not just working within like a half mile square here, you know.
No, and like even if they were, they did a better job of making it look different. That's and that's another thing. I keep talking about Bruno Mattei coming from that tradition of Italian directing, but one of the things I've always noticed about these, especially some of the framing and cinematography, but also just from a direction standpoint, there's I've always thought that there's like this one school that all the Italian directors come from, and then they just diverge off, and so you get like Fellini and Rossellini, whoever Vittorio De Sica going in one direction, and then like Bruno Mattei and Antonio Margheriti, whoever else going in another direction. But they seem like they came from the same place, and you can almost see some of that DNA. And it's always a weird thing to be like, I kind of recognize some elements from a Fellini movie in this thing. Most of it I don't, right? Most of it is not Fellini at all. But it's like these moments where I'm like, oh, that's a similar shot that Fellini would have done there. And it's always kind of an interesting thing.
You realize, of course, you're comparing the director of things like Shocking Dark to Fellini here. I
Yes,
mean,
exactly.
I think you
Yes.
get the prize today.
Right, exactly. Yeah, yeah. It's hard to. Yeah, I guess our Jacoda is the Anthony Quinn character in La Strada, right? Like he's yeah, exactly. Yeah, but yeah, it's always an interesting thing because I think nowadays when we think of low budget filmmaking, I don't know, there's almost like a more of an assembly line approach to a lot of modern direct to video movies.
Hmm.
Even to some extent there's an assembly line approach to even big budget movies, because it's like we got to get these out there. Let's go to Australia and go on or Pinewood Studios, whatever, and let's just bang that, do this thing out. Whereas I think there's almost like a bit more of an auteur element to these 80s ones, where it's like you get the sense that there's still an art to making movies, even if they're doing it on the cheap and they're doing it in this sort of crass, like, oh, we're going to cash in on Rambo kind of way.
Yeah, yeah, and doing it by the seat of their pants somewhat. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where you feel like there was just the thinnest of scripts when they're dealing with this. It's like, all right, well, here's this spot. We've got some buildings here. We can blow those up. Oh, looky here. Here's a lake. We can pop out of the lake and shoot
Yeah.
the machine gun. It's kind of just what do we got to work with? What do the people want to see here? The story to get there doesn't matter at all.
Right. Right. It's like the script, like you said, is a basic Rambo missing in action style kind of thing. And it's just like, what do you put in between? And yeah, what do we have that we can work with that we can throw in between? Oh, we got these guns we can use to shoot. Great. This is, these big guns here. This is great. We can blow some things up, have some squibs and stuff. And, I mean, how many, extras do we have from the Philippines that we can have shimmy?
We had the same extras over and over
I was
again.
gonna
Let's be
say,
honest. I
yeah.
mean, they're and yeah, these guys are like masterclass shimmiers. I mean,
Yes.
there was there's several that like you could put together a nice YouTube compilation of all the shimmies in this movie. There was one that stood out to me that comes late in the film because there's one point where he like charges into a building and is shooting up a
Oh,
bunch of
right.
folks,
Yes.
and there's one guy that gets blasted and then does a nice flop over this huge desk that's there. And I was just like, oh, that's chef's kiss dying there. That's great.
Yes, that was a beautiful one. We also had like the bowling pin effect, where
Oh yes,
you know
yes.
4 or 5 of them are standing up a row, and then he'll just mow them all down, and they all just kind of fall down like bowling pins, which is always great.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I was trying to think of some of the other ones because you get a few different things like that. Like you said, you get the shimmy. I mean, you get like the grenade in the middle, and they all go flying, in opposite directions.
Right,
Yeah.
right. You get a there was one guy that kind of flopped down a hillside at one point that I remember that was kind of good. So jumping in the water, there's a few of those. Yeah.
Yeah, they hit all the spots there with those, which I think it's part of the fun of watching these kinds of movies. And to your point, they do. I mean, I think for sure when he invades the building at the end of the movie, there are a couple guys that were in, because spoiler alert, Christopher Conley is he's who you think he is. And so
Mhm.
when they were going to take him out at the end there, there's definitely some guys that Reb Brown had killed earlier in the movie that are back in his gang again. And they were just like, and then again, the thing I think with that is that, sometimes with these movies, it's because they just didn't catch it. But I honestly, or they were editing and they, it just edited things out in a different order than they'd planned on. But I really think with Matai, between the anachronisms and all the other things, I think he's just like, nobody's going to notice. Just throw him in there
Yeah.
again. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's yeah, and honestly, you don't. I mean, it's the folks that are looking at it with a bit keener eye, like
Yeah.
we're trying to break down everything about this movie so we can have a nice long discussion about it. Yeah, the most folks just sitting there are going to go, oh yeah, they just shot up a bunch of people, and that's the way it goes.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That one little thing I wanted to mention before we got to get into the fight, of course, the end fight. But one little thing is that there's a scene where Mike Monty, the major, is going to pick up ransom, and Christopher Connolly's trying to call off the helicopters, and
Uh-huh.
and so there's a whole group of helicopters that go. There's a very quick shot of a guy flying one of the helicopters, who I'm pretty sure is this actor named Donald Wilson, who just happens to share the same name as Don the Dragon Wilson. And because of that, when people were doing IMDb, filmographies, they attributed a bunch of movies. I don't remember if this one. I don't because it's such a blink and you miss it moment where you see that actor that I don't think this was one of the movies. But there are a lot of movies. Actually, I think the scene where they show him the one shot that they show him, I think there's another movie called Saigon Commandos where he has a longer period as a helicopter pilot. I think they might have pulled it from there. But that Donald Wilson actor, Don the Dragon Wilson, was credited with a whole bunch of his movies erroneously. And I remember Will from Exploding Helicopter had to change his rankings because there were a bunch of movies with these Vietnamese shot in the Philippines movies with exploding helicopters that Don the Dragon Wilson originally was credited with, but now isn't because it's this Donald
Ah,
Wilson actor. So when I saw him for a
interesting.
second, I was like, oh, there he is, Donald Wilson. I see him again there. So yes, yeah.
Well, I had seen looking up some stuff in advance here that the Mike Monty, who plays
Mhm.
the major, who's kind of the good guy with our hero here, that early in his career he was credited under a different name, which was Michael O'Donoghue, and I was like, oh well, that's he was the chief writer in the first several seasons of Saturday Night Live. Michael O'Donoghue, completely different guy, you know.
Yes, that's a good point too. That would be
Um,
awesome if it was him.
Oh yeah, that'd be wild. You talking about the helicopter stuff made me remember that there are several points in this film, some with helicopters and some with some other stuff, where very suddenly and briefly they will cut to what is clearly old footage, like from it almost even feels like news footage from the actual Vietnam era. And, so like we're watching this stuff that was shot in 1987, and then suddenly there's this much grainier footage of a helicopter landing. And, it looks like it's from at least 10 years earlier. There's a moment like that too, where at one point there's a trap that one of the baddies falls into that Reb Brown has, which is like one of those walls of spikes type of
Oh
thing,
yes.
and it comes from out of nowhere, and the footage of this wall of spikes is again that old grainier footage, and it's just very brief, a second and a half or whatever, and then we go back to new footage from '87. So that was an odd choice and quite jarring when it comes up.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the thing is now with the Severin cleaned up version of the movie, it's even more stark than it
Yeah.
was. If you were watching this on a VHS, that you grabbed the videos, which I don't even know how much these movies were available in American video stores.
Oh, I remember seeing these on the shelf.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you saw, okay. Yeah, my video store didn't have as big of a selection. So we didn't quite, though I do think some of those Godfrey Ho Ninja movies did make it to my video store.
Mhm.
So, and I guess, because I know when I watched the documentary called We Kill for Love that was on erotic thrillers, they had said that part of the mom and pop video store model was that the limited selection actually made them more money because if you went
Mhm.
in for First Blood Part 2 and they didn't have it, oh well, get Strike Commando instead and come back for, Rambo First Blood Part 2 later, and now you've made two movies instead of one. And then when the Blockbuster model takes over, Blockbuster had so many copies of First Blood Part 2 that you didn't have to worry about, not getting a copy. And it is interesting because, some of these movies did kind of fit that niche. I mean, I for me and my friends, it wasn't so much that like, oh, Rambo's not there because, somebody probably had it on anyway, It was more like everybody's seen Rambo however many times. What's the movie we can get instead of Rambo? That was kind of more for us. But it is interesting how Blockbuster almost kind of killed its own model because it made movies like this obsolete because they were just everybody could get the new movie.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember there was a mom and pop video store just a few blocks down the road from my house as a kid. And yeah, if you went in there, like I remember the week that Ghostbusters came out, I was so excited. Ghostbusters came out. They had one copy of Ghostbusters, and then, a few years later when you had Blockbuster, they would have had 30 copies of Ghostbusters there. So yeah.
Yeah, and the funny thing for us, we didn't get Blockbuster until I want to say like the mid '90s. Might have been the first Blockbuster that we had where I lived. So it was the mom and pops, throughout my time. It was like eventually there was a Blockbuster that opened near one of the strip malls, and I mean that was kind of how Blockbuster made its money was that they would be in those, really advantageous locations near a grocery store and the drugstore, all that. Yeah, so it's like, oh, you're going to grab the movie while you're picking everything else up, and it's perfect location. But yeah, so we had the mom and pops like right up until I mean I would say like I went to college in '97, and I don't remember if we had Blockbuster by then. We might have had it by then. But but the mom and pops were still big enough at that time. It was more like the early 2000s when Blockbuster was able to kind of fully sort of sink their teeth into the market and run them out of business.
I mean, Blockbuster changed all the rules from my point of view when I was a kid because, yeah, like I said, they had more copies of everything. They did it differently where they had the actual tape behind the box, whereas
Yes.
before that, at all the mom and pop stores, you had to take the empty box up to the counter and then they would give you the movie. The one place that we used to frequent a lot had one of the weirdest ways of kind of displaying the movies where they did them by company. So like there wasn't a comedy section, there was a horror section, there was a Paramount section and a Warner Brothers section, and so then you had uniformity of all the boxes because remember Warner Brothers had those big weird clamshell, black clamshell boxes, and then that was before everybody went to the simple cardboard slip covers. So
Yeah, that's kind of a fascinating way to do it because, when you think of some of those movies where you're like, well, is that a horror movie or is it a thriller? Or, some of the ones that kind of cross genres and you weren't sure where you'd find it, at least if you knew what studio, but you'd have to know what studio it was too. And it's like,
it was weird. It was a weird way of doing it.
That is so true. I've never thought, yeah, wow, yeah. Yeah, I know like we had one that held out until it closed on getting a computerized system. They never went to computers. So my friend's dad was the one who like hooked up all the computer systems for all the businesses in my town, and he talked about that one time when I was visiting. We were having dinner at his house, and he was saying, "Oh yeah, I've never been able to get them." They up until the end, till the very end, they had the receipt with the carbon paper. So they would write it and you'd get your copy, they'd take theirs and they'd stick it on a nail on the counter. And that was what they did until they and I think I don't think they went out of business. I think the parents got to, because it was the parents and then a kid who was like a class or two below me. The parents said, okay, we're retiring and we're just going to sell this thing because the kid didn't want to run it. And that was it. They were done. And so I want to say they closed just before Blockbuster was running everybody out of business because the other one that was kind of down the street from them, that one did event. They ended up, I think they got bought out by like Movie Scene or something like that. It was like a small movie scene there.
Oh, all this talk of the old video stores, it definitely makes me wish we had those days again. It was
I
so much
know.
fun.
It was like this thing that like I don't know. It's so different. I was talking to somebody about this. I can't remember, but I was talking about how I always have this mindset of like if I'm watching a movie, I've got to go to 7-Eleven and get junk food to watch the movie.
Yeah.
And I think it's because of that the video store was next to like like an Osco drug or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And you'd go in and you'd get like you get all the snacks and stuff. and then you get the movie, and then you take them into the Osco drugs, and you get like your, the candy and all that stuff. And it was like, it feels like I can't watch a movie without all that junk food
Uh,
to go with it.
you know what was next to our Blockbuster was Little Caesars Pizza. So,
Oh,
you get your movie, you get your pizza, and you
yeah.
got your Friday night right there.
Yeah. Oh, that's perfect. Yeah. I was trying to think what was, so, I mean, I remember Osco's, that was the big one. But there was a pizza place. So it wasn't next to it. It was a little further away, but that was part of the process. Or, sometimes we call an order Domino's. That was, another one.
Mm.
Because I think I remember what Domino's was that like, because, again, that back then everybody's paying with cash. And if we didn't have enough for a tip, there was one delivery person who, she would slam the door if you didn't give her a tip. And so we would try to get the money together with a tip, but it was like, oh man, if we only got the 20, it's like,
Well,
yeah,
that's the thing. Back then, Little Caesars didn't deliver. You had to pick
right,
it
that's
up,
right.
So you mentioned Osco. My first job was in an Osco. I was a
That was
stock boy at Osco. Yeah.
that's awesome. Yes, yeah. The Osco in our town. The funny thing was, it became a Brooks Pharmacy, and then no, it was there was a Rite Aid next to the Osco that tried to run the Osco out of business, and it didn't. So when the Rite Aid went out of business, the Osco moved in. Then the Osco got bought out by Brooks, and then Rite Aid brought out Brooks, and so then like it ended up being a Rite Aid anyway. So
Well, see,
yeah.
the way it is in the Chicago area where I grew up, um, you don't get freestanding Oscos for the most part.
Hmm.
Oscos are in there with Jewel, which is the
Yeah.
main grocery store chain in the Chicago area. So, imagine like your regular grocery store you go into, the tech that technically where you're buying your cereal and bananas and stuff is a different store than the same space just a few aisles down where you're buying your Tylenol and your
Yeah.
diapers and things like that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's it. Because I know grocery stores do that now. Like here in Philly, the Acme has a pharmacy in it. But yeah, that's right. 'Cause where we were, I think there might have been some that did have Oscos in them. Like Market Basket may have teamed up with the Osco kind of towards the end there when that, because yeah, because again, where we were, they were all freestanding Oscos that
Mm.
they were kind of ripe to get picked off eventually by a
Uh-huh.
bigger company. So. Yeah, God, those, again, those old days of just, all those things. And now it's like you're lucky if you can find a drugstore because they're all consolidating and closing and yeah, it's yeah, exactly. Well, I guess we've got to get into this fight scene here because
Yes.
this is the scene that everybody knows. I did a video myself because I would do these videos on YouTube of like clips of movies, of these direct video movies, and I did this fight scene. I mean, this is one of the best, I guess, man, and you can put best in quotes probably, but
I mean, it becomes a cartoon eventually, the way that it goes. When you have the moment where they're running towards each other and they slam foreheads together, you know,
right,
you're just like, what am I watching here? This is like Popeye and Bluto. This shouldn't be happening in the real world.
exactly. Well, because it's really interesting because you get like, obviously, so it's towards the end of the movie, and here's Ransom. He's like taking guys out, and then he's hiding behind a rock, and he gets kicked over by a big military boot, and we find out that's Jakota, and Jakota's like, hey, come on, show me what you got. He gets his fist out, and Ransom's like, yeah, all right, I'll take. He takes his coat off. He's like, yeah, all right, I'll do that, and the funny thing is like Jakota punches him twice in the face, and he's like, is that all you got? And it's like, well, he hasn't even done anything yet. What do you mean is that all he's got? And, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great sequence. It just gets more and more ridiculous as it goes on. And the finish of things with Jakota falling off of a waterfall, a
Hmm.
huge waterfall. Um, and doesn't he scream Ransom's name as he goes down or
He says
something like that?
Amerikanski.
Oh, yeah, that's what he says. Yeah. And and then, he comes back at the end, however many years in the future it is, 15 years in the future. And he's got, like Jaws teeth now, like, Richard Keel Jaws from the James
Right.
Bond movies. And we get another fight sequence there, which, I mean, as great as the fight, leading up to the waterfall is, I mean, you can't beat stuffing a grenade in his mouth and then he blows up.
Right.
Everything but the teeth, though. The teeth remain. He picks up the
Exactly.
teeth, keeps them as a souvenir.
Right, exactly. And I mean, it reminded me of George Wentz appearance on MASH, right, where he's got the pool ball stuck in his mouth. So it was kind of like it's just he couldn't get the grenade out. And I mean the other thing is during the scenes where Ransom is kind of going around picking people off, it always reminded me of those Three Stooges episodes where like they'd be in a haunted mansion and there'd be like somebody in an ape suit that would be like picking off the kid,
Yeah.
and like they're like the blonde woman would be like in a closet like tied up or something like Mo, and then it'd be like Curly would like bend over to pick something up right as the gorilla would try to get him, or that would be the joke.
Yep.
But it was kind of a similar thing where like people are just kind of walking around and he just like grabs them from behind, just
Hmm.
picking them off left and right. And then in that fight scene, you get these like Three Stooges moments where like he's like raking his face or he's grabbing his nose, and it was just like very much like Mo just like getting angry at Curly or Larry for doing something.
Except with more blood.
Right.
There is definitely a fair amount of blood in that sequence, which is kind of fun. I mean, it's not like it's terribly graphic or anything like that, but especially with just the wonderfully odd expressions that that Dakota is able to do. Then when you get it where his face is just kind of sprinkled with blood and all that kind of stuff, it just adds to it.
Right. Well, because then like Reb Brown's face is covered in blood, and I wonder too, like, I didn't see like the stunt, stuff like what the different credits were in there, but I wonder that fight scene looks a lot like there's the Saved by the Bell episode where uh Mark Paul Gosselaar and Mario Lopez, AC Slater, they had a fight in the show, and they interviewed Mark Paul Gosselaar about it after. He's like, "Yeah, when I did stuff after Saved by the Bell, I learned about things like stunt coordinators and blocking the scene and all of this stuff. We didn't do any of that. They just put us together in the scene and said fight." And he's
Hmm.
like, Mario Lopez was a wrestler. Like he did like a hip check on, like we were
Yeah, yeah.
really, and I do wonder how much of the fight between Reb Brown and Dakota also was like really choreographed, and how much like when they were like wrestling and stuff like that, like they're really going at it. And I mean, not like going at it for real, but like actually like wrestling each other that like, I don't, Reb Brown looked exhausted when they got to the end of this fight scene. And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
The thing that kind of was the weirdest for me when it came to this whole kind of succession of events with their fight, and then we jump forward in the future, and then we have another fight, and there's this whole thing with the teeth. He's got these jaws now. And I'm like, there was nothing about the previous fight that would indicate that he would have lost his teeth. He's making like, you did this to me type of a thing. And you're like, did I miss something? Did he like smash him in the face and all his teeth fell out or something? No, it's just, I guess that's what happens to you when you fall off a waterfall. You lose all your teeth, I guess.
right, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, there's this scene like just before that happens where Reb Brown is sitting there and he's like exhausted. He's covered, his face is covered in blood. He's trying to make like a concerned, like angry look on his face, but he really just looks like he's just done. And
Yeah.
then Dakota's delivering the big line of like, when I was massacring that village, I saved Lao for last. He had
Uh-huh.
such fragile bones, and all that stuff. And then,
You wanted to
that
go to Disneyland.
exactly,
I'll
exactly.
show you Disneyland, kid.
Exactly. This is what Disneyland in Moscow is, right? Right. And so then he charges him, but it is such a funny scene there. I mean, just like the line and everything. Oh, he had such fragile bones, and that's like what it sets him off, and he's got to go. Yeah, what a trip that whole thing is, and like you said, he just falls into the waterfall. Like of all the things that could have happened to him when he fell in that waterfall, losing all of his teeth didn't seem like the one that it would have
No,
happened to
no.
him.
It's a great fall though. I enjoyed that. I mean, it's one of those where you think, oh, they're gonna sell this short or something. Because there are several moments in this film where, they could have gone bigger or something, but I'm sure because of budget they didn't. But yeah, the fall off the waterfall is quite good actually.
Yeah, I mean the stunts overall were good. I mean, there was definitely somewhere I was a little nervous. Like, there's a couple moments where a couple of the Viet Cong get set on fire, and
Uh-huh.
like when we watched Riot, a couple years ago, there were plenty of people set on fire with that. But every time there was a scene of somebody set on fire, it was in slow motion.
Hmm.
So you got the sense that they weren't on fire for that long. With these, I mean, I think they were repeating the same scenes over and over again, so it wasn't like they were, but they definitely were not in slow motion. And I was like, man, how long are those people on fire for? Because it's
Yeah.
like, I mean, you could at least see they had mitts on their hands. They weren't trying to hide any of that stuff from us. But there is a little sense of like, boy, I hope everybody's all right making this
Yeah,
movie.
no, I mean this is one of those kind of films you look at and you go, yeah, I'm sure they they didn't have quite the eye for safety that maybe your major Hollywood films do.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And again, Reb Brown, I'm sure he's got some stories. I mean, again, when he's running through the rice paddies and things are blowing up behind him, it's just like, man, just don't trip
Yeah.
because yeah, yeah, and I mean, because it was definitely him that was doing the running,
Mhm.
and I think that was him. You know, that's him standing up on the edge of the waterfall there when when
Mhm.
they pulled that shot there. So yeah, he was doing a lot of his own stunts there, Mr.
I
Brown.
mean,
So
overall, I think he does a solid job in this. I'm never gonna get up there and say that, yeah, oh yeah, Reb Brown is the underappreciated. He should have been up there with your Stallones, your Schwarzeneggers, whatever. Um, I think he does a solid job. There's maybe a few moments here where I felt he was maybe a little too pretty for things. I wanted him to be a little more grizzled. I think that's maybe one area where Deadly Prey did a little better. And I think we even said how he, in Deadly Prey, he's still very pretty. But Red Brown doesn't quite look as, like the war has, just torn this guy apart quite yet. He's a little too put together at times.
no, he definitely does not look like somebody who's been in Vietnam doing special forces work for the past however many years.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no. I mean, to be fair, Mike Monty really doesn't need. I mean, yeah, probably the
No,
most grizzled out of all of them is Christopher
it's
Connolly, right?
Connolly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, to be fair, Dakota really doesn't look like he'd been in that much either. It's like, yeah, I mean,
No.
I think there's one
It's
scene.
certainly not his girl. I mean,
Yes,
it's
oh no,
like,
she.
what is she
Yes,
doing there?
right, exactly. She's like sunbathing in
They
her
told me
bikini.
this is a resort. I mean,
Right, exactly. Yeah, I was thinking like the closest
no,
to.
I'm sorry to keep
No, go
interrupting,
ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
but yeah, I didn't even think about it. She's like going out to sunbathe and stuff. I was like, is there another Vietnam film like this from the 80s where you get a bikini scene? I
Right,
mean,
exactly, exactly. Yeah, I was thinking. I mean, I guess you got the beginning of Apocalypse Now, right? Where I love the
there
smell
you
of
go.
napalm in
Yeah.
the morning. He's surfing. I guess that might be it, right?
Yeah,
That's
you do get the girls in Apocalypse Now, but yeah, that's it.
yeah,
They aren't fighting there though. They're just putting on a show. She's one of the bad guys in this one.
right. Yes, no, exactly. That's a good point. Yeah, yeah, it's kind of crazy. And I was thinking, like, yeah, like in terms of being grizzled, there's that when he first comes back, I think he's got 5 o'clock shadow.
Hmm.
But it's like a very brief scene of him with 5 o'clock shadow. The rest of the time, he's completely clean shaven,
Yeah,
which,
yeah.
again, I don't know how it didn't look like he was taking time to shave. I mean, granted, it's not like he's out there that long, other than the fact that he was 28 days, which, yeah, I guess even the 28 days in captivity, he looked pretty good for being in 28 days in captivity.
There was somebody that came in there and said, "Let me give you your morning shave here before we electrocute you on a bed frame."
Exactly. Well, that's right. Olga was going to shave him before he gave his first speech when they'd killed off the other
Ah,
guy. That's right. I forgot
yes,
about that.
yes.
Yeah, and then he ends up dispatching all of them and taking her with him. So, yeah, because there's a scene kind of I don't was there
Oh,
supposed to be
that's a fun moment. I forgot about that where he's like, yeah, they're putting him in front of the microphone
yeah.
and he acts like he's playing along and then he's like, go on, guys, we're behind you or whatever he's
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And then he does a really good sidekick to one of the guys
yeah.
as well. I mean that's the thing too. He's a big athletic guy, but I think you can also see too how there's a ceiling. There's a Red Brown ceiling, where
Hmm.
he wasn't going to get his own Three's Company. He was going to be he wasn't going to get his own Miami Vice or even like a Matt Houston or something, right? He was going to be the guest star for one episode,
Yeah, yeah.
that was probably, but on the other hand, these movies gave him an opportunity. I mean, Space Mutiny, he did that with his wife in South Africa. And it was like, oh, I got a free trip to South Africa with my wife, I think that's how he saw a lot of these movies. Like, oh, I'll take a free trip to the Philippines. Though
Yeah,
I'm sure when
sure.
he got out there in the jungle, he's probably like, maybe I shouldn't have done this. But it's kind of fun to see him get these kind of roles here. And I've seen him in interviews and stuff, and I know that again, Rich Pierce we've had on said he's really nice, to talk to. And so he seems like a nice enough guy. It's kind of fun to see him get these moments here. And of course, we get the classic Reb Brown scream. We get our Reb Brown moments for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a fun ride for sure. And I mean, it's not required viewing for the sequel, but the sequel is better than the
Yes.
first one.
Right. The sequel is a trip. It'll be fun when we talk about that one at some point because yeah, that one it's because they do more with the it's not the Olga character, it's a different character because they're all different characters. But they do more with the interplay there with Brent Huff and then the character who's similar to the Olga character in that one. It's almost like kind of like a rom-com in some ways, or like a like an Italian screwball comedy, with like, what is it, like Marriage Italian style. I think it's like the one with Marcello Mastroianni and Sophia Loren, or it's one of the divorce Italians, so something like that has them doing a bunch of different vignettes where they're a couple, you know, and yeah, there's something about that interplay that I really like with Brent Huff and the other character.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil too much for when we do get to the sequel, but the highlight for me is definitely the stunts in that film
Yeah.
because it's well, let's just put it this way. They are very strongly influenced by another movie
Right.
shot in a shot for shot kind of way. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, definitely, definitely. Yeah. Well, I guess here with Strike Commando, anything that we missed, anything that you wanted to mention that we missed about this one?
I think we've got hit all the things that I was thinking about. So, yeah, I think we did pretty good there.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And again, I think for people who haven't seen this or haven't seen it in a while, the Tubi version with the Severin cleaned up version is definitely a fun watch. It's only an hour and a half long. I mean, yes, the torture thing in the middle. Nothing is there's nothing graphic about it. I mean, I
No,
guess
no.
the dead guy I mean, he's not like he's decaying. He's just just laying there dead, and we understand what's happening.
Yeah. You get little hints, but I mean, considering this guy is someone that worked on some of the zombie movies, it doesn't go very far. So yeah.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So it's a lot of fun. Well, Todd, as we're wrapping up here, anything that you wanted to plug?
Oh, of course. So yeah, of course, my podcast is the Forgotten Filmcast. Matt's been on the show several times. I've been a little behind on episodes lately. I'll explain why here in a minute. But on that show, we talk about what I like to call the movies that time forgot. So movies that not a lot of people are talking about. On some of the most recent episodes, we did a little known Sherlock Holmes story called The 7% Solution. We did The Wild Geese, which, I mean, if you're into Strike Force, you're probably into The Wild Geese. It's a man's man kind of military movie there as well. Um, but yeah, I've been a little behind on episodes here recently because I've been traveling, but also because I've been prepping a new project as well, which I'm really excited to let people know about. The first episode of this is going to be hitting here just in the next couple of days as we're recording this. So probably as this episode is up, you'll be able to listen to this new show. But I have partnered with Andy Golding, who has been a guest on my show several times, for a new podcast called Cartoon Breakdown. And we kind of discovered through the times he was on my show that we both share a love for classic animated shorts. And we would spend a lot of time talking about that anytime he was on my show. So we decided, well, you know what? Let's just start a podcast about classic animated films. So we're dealing with the golden age of animation here, talking about films from pretty much the 1920s through the 1960s, looking at all the major animation studios, Disney, Looney Tunes, MGM, Walter Lantz, Fleischer Studios, all those different things, looking at your, favorite cartoon characters from all those different ones, kind of following a theme on each episode. So we're going to be doing like three or four shorts on each episode, digging into those, talking about all the different things we love about them, the folks behind the scenes, and we're really looking forward to unleashing this on the world. We've been working on it since earlier this year. We started recording episodes back in March, and so now here in July we are ready to put stuff out there. We've already got a good 10 episodes recorded, so we're working ahead, but we're really excited about what's in store, and I hope everyone will check it out.
Oh, wow, I'm really excited to check that out because you know, MeTV has cartoons in the mornings, and my wife a lot of times will have that on, and I'll sit and watch some with her before I start work or whatever. And it is interesting how watching them as an adult, I not only do I see things in them that I didn't see as a kid, but it's just like obviously like like the Looney Tunes with like Mel Blanc is just doing every voice, or something like that. I absolutely love that. So I can't wait to hear what you guys talk about on that podcast. And so like you said, the episode will probably drop before because this episode's coming out a couple weeks from now as we're recording. So I'll put the information in the podcast description.
Yeah, yeah. The first episode is we're launching on July 1st. So yeah,
Okay.
by the time this is up, it'll be out there. And maybe even the second one will be up. We're going to be releasing episodes every 2 weeks at this point. And we got a group on Facebook. We're on all the socials. If you search for at Toon Breakdown, you'll find us there. So yeah, we're in those early stages where we're trying to build our community and such. So yeah, definitely want people to get involved early on here.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, I'm excited about this because I am, like I said, this is a topic that I have recently, like I said, gotten back into with MeTV showing cartoons, showing older cartoons in the mornings. When I say older cartoons, I mean, from the same era.
Yeah.
I think maybe they don't go quite back so far. It's more, I think, the 40s and 50s ones maybe that they do. Um, but again, they're mostly Looney Tunes, I think, that they do on MeTV.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some stuff. I admit I don't have a hookup here where I can get Me TV at my place,
Mm.
but I have seen things about what they put up there. It's actually interesting because Me TV is based out of Chicago, if my memory is correct. It's a lot of the stuff that they have through that service is basically the stuff I grew up with on UHF TV in Chicago. The cartoons, the shows that were reruns and syndication, even down to Sven Gulli. He was our horror host in the Chicago area. So from what I've seen of Me TV when I've like traveled back home to Chicago and things like that, it's very much the television of my youth that played on like channel 32 and channel 50 and things like that. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. The funny thing with Svengoolie, because he's in Berwyn, Illinois.
yep, I
And,
was born in Berwyn.
that's
Yes.
right. I think you've told that's right. I think we've talked
Yeah.
about this. Yeah, because there's a Berwyn in Pennsylvania. And so at first my wife and I are like, oh, is he shooting that around here? Is this a Philadelphia show? And then I think we watched to the end credits and it said Illinois. And we're like, oh, okay. All right, that makes more sense. Yeah.
Mhm.
Because he didn't sound like he's from Philly. Sounds like he's from Chicago. But but that's so cool that you're the same, so yeah, whenever they mention Berwyn, that's where you're from. That's awesome. Perfect. Well, I am excited to check that out. You said it's a cartoon breakdown.
Cartoon breakdown. Yeah, I
Yeah.
should be able to find it wherever you find your podcasts.
All right, perfect. And yeah, the information will be in the podcast description so people can check that out as well, along with Forgotten Filmcast as well. There's room for more podcasts. So you can listen to both for sure. So
Absolutely.
yeah, definitely. Well, thank you again for coming on, Todd. This was a ton of fun.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. And thank you everybody for listening. We'll be back soon. Bye, everyone.